Hello, my name is Neil, and this is a demonstration of the Neltulz Smart Sharpen script that I created for Blender 2.8 and why I think it's the answer to all of your sharpening needs. So first I'll go ahead and add a cube to the scene, and at first glance there doesn't appear to be anything wrong with it. All of the edges appear to be sharp, and that is because all objects appear with flat shading by default. And so if I add in a torus, the problem is revealed right away. All of the faces and edges appear to be really sharp, and so the default way to handle that in Blender is to right-click and go to Smooth, Shade Smooth, and that fixes the torus. However, if I go to the cube and right-click and go to Shade Smooth, that obviously ruins the cube. And so the typical answer is to go to your normals and then turn on auto smooth, and it defaults to a value of 30, which is pretty good for the cube by default. And so that can be problematic in some situations because you'll be warring with this angle value. And so I'll just go ahead and give you an example of something like that. So let's say that I want to select some of these faces here, and I'm going to go ahead and extrude that out like so. And for this one, I did not turn on auto smooth, so I'll go ahead and turn that on, and that appears to fix up this extrusion that I made, but there are some problems that become evident elsewhere in the mesh. So then you just got to tweak these numbers until you get rid of those hard edges, and then this looks pretty good. So then as you're working on the mesh, and let's say you're in edge mode, and you select this edge right here, and then you do something like slide this edge, and then you slide it again, and you decide, oh wow, I really want that edge to be smooth now, it doesn't need to be that sharp. So then you start changing these values even more, and you realize quickly that it's not targeting the correct ones, it's clearing these other ones before it clears this one. And so it becomes a war where you have to kind of get it close to what you want, and then you go in here and you select these edges, and then you have to manually mark them as sharp. And for a lot of situations, that can be that can get you out of trouble in a lot of those situations. However, at the end of the day, it's just a dynamic preview, and it doesn't really give you extreme fine control over anything. Just to give you an example, let's say that this edge right here, I want that to be smooth. For whatever reason, I realize that's more than a 90-degree angle. So maybe I want that to be smooth, and you right-click and you go to Clear Sharp, and it doesn't really do anything because clearing sharp is not the same thing as marking soft. All Clear Sharp does is it merely just gets rid of a sharpened edge on there, and there's no sharp edge on there to begin with because those are marked as like these light sky blue lines or whatever. And so this is not a sharpened edge, and so you can't really get rid of that because the auto smooth feature is basically preventing us from smoothing that edge out. And in this situation, you're really kind of screwed. So you have to ramp up this slider really high, like greater than, in this case, looks like greater than 110 degrees. And of course, you got to go in here and do a bunch of cleanup work and select all these edges that you didn't want to be softened, and you have to manually mark them as sharp. And that's where it becomes really tedious, and that is where my Smart Sharpen script comes in handy. So the way it works is, let's say that you are in face mode, and then you select, let's see here, you select these faces right here. In the top right corner, you can choose from some of these preset values. So you can choose like 35, and let me go ahead and add more to the selection, and just do 35. And so it's only affecting the selection region and nothing else. And so I can go in here and just tweak these values to whatever one I want, whichever one gets me close, and I can just keep clicking these buttons. And so once I get close to what I want, I can just switch back to edge mode, select these edges right here, and then I can choose something like 180, which guarantees that that line will become full soft. So this gives you full control over it, and it's completely automatic. So if I select a bunch of edges, I can then click these buttons, and it'll just try to select all the matching sharp edges and clear them right up. And so let's say that you don't like the way this works, and you want to go back to having an auto smooth, like a dynamic auto smooth, but you also want to be able to select faces and then click these buttons up here to get that fine granular control. You can check mark use advanced settings, and then here I've got the same auto smooth normals feature right here, and you can choose that. You can change that to say like 45, and so now it's whenever I apply the next sharpening on here, it will then revert this back to 45 degrees for the dynamic normal smoothing, and you still get that fine control over everything that you would otherwise. And let's say you mess things up and you just turn off auto smooth entirely, you'll get a warning saying you have to have that on. That really needs to be on, and so you just check that. Or let's say you turn off smooth shading and you want to go back to flat shading, and none of these buttons are going to work if you choose that, and so you're going to get an error for that as well. And so and then in here, let's say that you choose a really, really low angle value, like let's say 10 degrees, and then you try to sharpen, then you get another error that says, okay, that's a really low angle. You really shouldn't be using that low angle. Please try something else. And then it recommends a value of 89.9. So if I type in 89.9, you're going to get like great results every time. And so let's say you don't like those pop-ups and it's really slowing you down. You can just go right here to Mr. I'm a Badass, hover over that, and it says I know what I'm doing, and you can check that. Then you can go back and set this to a value of 10 and click all these buttons, and you won't get any error pop-ups, and everything will still work, but you just won't get any kind of errors or pop-ups trying to remind you that you're doing something wrong. And that should really cover it. Another situation in which you might find the Smart Sharpen utility useful is when you've got a situation like this where you've already applied your sharp edges, you've got an auto smooth value of 180 degrees, and you go to extrude this face right here, and you notice that your mesh is messed up, but you don't want to go in here and tediously select all these edges and fix them, so you can then just select all edges, click one of these buttons, and it's fixed right up. And then as you continue to work on your mesh, let's say you want to bevel this edge right here, and that looks okay. It's missing some edges right in here. Let's go ahead and add some segments, and now we've really got a problem because these edges should not be sharp right here, and then these edges right here should be sharp. So then as you've got this selection still active, you can then click, let's say 35, and that gets us pretty close. 25, that gets us even closer. And then we can just select, the edge mode, select these four faces that are causing the problem, sharpen those up, and then that's a pretty quick, effective way that you can fix any problematic sharp edges on your mesh. And again, as you continue to go along, let's say you select these edges right here, and then you bevel that. That looks okay. There's one edge in here that should probably be sharpened. It didn't quite make it. You can just click one button and it fixes that right up. Let's say you want some segments in there. Okay. When you add the segments, it clears the sharp on that, and then these edges right here remain, and that's not correct. So you can go ahead and just click another button, and once again, it gets you pretty close. You can just select those and then sharpen that. And in like 2 seconds, I have basically fixed all issues on this mesh.